Welcome to another episode of Banking Transformed, the podcast that dives deep into the trends, innovations, and strategies shaping the future of banking. I'm your host, Jim Marous, owner and CEO of the Digital Banking Report and co-publisher of the Financial Brand. In this episode of Banking Transformed, we're excited to bring you an insightful conversation with three leaders from Meriwest Credit Union, a $2 billion community financial institution serving the greater Bay Area of California and Pima County, Arizona. Despite the challenges posed by an uncertain economic environment, Meriwest Credit Union has demonstrated the ability to innovate at speed and scale, largely due to their strategic partnership with Terafina, a leading provider of digital banking solutions. Join us as we explore how this forward-thinking credit union has leveraged digital capabilities to transform their operations, enhance member experiences, and position themselves for long-term success. Meriwest Credit Union has embraced digital transformation to enhance member experiences, drive operational efficiency, and position themselves for long-term success. Our guest today will share valuable insights on the power of strategic partnerships, the importance of balancing digital innovation with a personal touch, and the key lessons that everyone can learn along the way. So before we start, can each of you share a bit about your background and what sets Meriwest apart from your competition from your perspective? Mary, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm the Senior Program Manager for Digital Innovation. My background is in project management, program management, PMO. I've been with Meriwest for just under 5 years, and my goal is always how we can improve upon the customer journey.
That's pretty cool. Cindy, how about you?
Cindy Watson. I'm the Chief Risk and Operations Officer for the credit union. I oversee the risk, the compliance, and the operations. So I work with the digital innovation team from A to Z, right? Make sure that customer experience is in compliance, but also the best experience that we can offer for our members.
And Jean, how about sharing a little bit about yourself and what sets Meriwest Credit Union apart?
Okay, let's find out. So my name is Jean Fechtenholz, and I'm VP of Digital Strategy. I'm leading digital innovation team, and my background is actually technical. So I was in charge for business intelligence some time, business intelligence and AI, and then eventually moved to my role to expand our digital offerings. What sets apart? So there's a couple of things. I would say that we are not afraid to take certain risks, especially when we're actually adopting new technologies. And actually very much thankful for our executive for this, for sure. We always get a lot of support. I think the internal culture is amazing. So that's definitely something needs to be said for. I have, our department is small, like it's only a couple of people, right? We have like total 4, and it's absolutely impossible to make complicated projects by yourself. It's absolutely impossible, right? So in order to take something off the ground, especially as big as account opening and digital banking, you need help from everybody. And that's probably our biggest strength. We do work together incredibly well. So it's a well-oiled machine that actually keep chugging along and keep inventing stuff.
So it's interesting, each of you, that you brought up so many interesting points in your introduction. Number one, Cindy, you mentioned you're in charge of operations and risk. And I've said it many times in the podcast that you can't move forward, number one, without the back office working on your behalf. So you can't build a good experience without the operations elements working well together. In addition, and you referenced it also in the beginning, Cindy, that you really need to bring risk and compliance to the table at the front end as opposed to the back end. That right off the bat sets Meriwest Credit Union apart from many of your competitors, because we always tend to, as marketing and innovation people, we tend to think, you know what, maybe we'll bring compliance in at the end because they're the people that we just dread it sometimes.
No.
But the reality is, if you make them part of the innovation process, it really works to your advantage. Cindy, in your position, again, knowing that you can't innovate without the back office fixed, how do you do that? And how do you take on not only the operation, but the risk and compliance role in a way that's not threaten your people? Because digital transformation by its own nature is sometimes changing the back office jobs, but also where other people bring you in on the front end. How do you do that? Or how do you make that work?
I think it's part of bringing in. So I have their separate teams, right, including fraud. So we bring in our teams up front. I think involving from the very beginning so that everybody understands what our initiative is, what our end game is, and make sure that we get everybody's buy-in. I think that's the key part of it, is understanding why we're doing this, right? Sometimes when you're on the fraud end, working a fraud case, it's like, well, why did we do that? And so bringing them in at the beginning helps us all understand why we did this. We all agreed to do this, and we have that buy-in. I'm sure Jean is going to add on to that because on all of our projects, we work together to get them involved up front, right? With testing, from the configuration, from risk assessments, all of it.
I would like to add also.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah. So I think that's actually a very good point. And something, Jim, that you touched that's actually quite dear to us. We bring on the complicated projects compliance from day one.
Yeah.
And we actually prefer to be, it's both. We usually do compliance and training. And sometimes training, they didn't do anything, just observe, okay? What they do is that they learn from the process. And the same thing, but with compliance, what's happening is that you really do need to know when you're speaking to your members, when you're actually doing anything digital with your members, right?
Yeah.
You need to know you're not doing anything stupid, something that's not allowed, okay? Something that's going to shoot you in the foot later. Mm-hmm. So that's why compliance is incredibly important. That's number one. Number two is that what people overlook often is that, oh yeah, we created this account opening, it works marvelous. But what's happening on the back end?
Yeah.
So, because what somebody's holding back, right? So you have only so many successful sessions, obviously, right? You have successful, smooth, wonderful conversions of accounts, so many of them, right? But you have so many of them, then it's not going to go well, right? So you have somebody needs to be reviewed, somebody needs to be declined, somebody needs to be verified, and everything like that. So how's that process looking, right?
Yeah.
So if you improve your digital experience for members, but you degrade the experience from your back end, then your efficiency going down as well. So that's really important.
And there's nothing worse, if I can add to Jean, there's nothing worse than developing a process that you think works great, it's efficient, mm-hmm. and then in the end, you're out of compliance, you forgot a disclosure, you're not disclosing XYZ correctly. Yeah. It does not work, and it's inefficient. So that's the reason why we do what we do.
So Mary, you are the head of innovation, in charge of innovation. And from that perspective, there's a lot we have to do. And I'll call it innovation, but transformation innovation to modernize our financial institutions as in general. Mm-hmm. How do you prioritize what you spend your time on or what you want to move to next? And for instance, let's go back a little bit. Let's see, what innovations have you done in the last 12 months? And then as you look forward, what is on your to-do list?
That's a big list. That's a big list, Jim.
That's right. I'm going to hold you accountable for it, too.
In the last 12 months, our focus is on how do we add convenience and efficiency for our members, right? So we're coming from this generation of convenience now, regardless of age, regardless of generation. We have this tendency to focus on one demographic, but in reality, regardless of age, we all are focused on convenience. We have DoorDash, we have all of these apps that allow us greater convenience in our life, and banking is no different. People want a convenient, they expect a convenient, quick solution. So our focus is on how do we accommodate that for our membership community?
So, but looking at that then, what have you done in the last year? What are some of the things, and maybe 18 months, what are some of the innovations or improvements, let's say, because innovation is an overused word, and a lot of what we talk about in banking is innovation to us is just normal business for members.
Yeah.
But what have you done in the last year to make banking easier?
We converted our online and mobile banking solution, and that was pretty.
Oh, wow.
That was pretty significant project, right? So, we've seen huge improvements. And on our mobile banking alone, what our members are able to do in mobile banking is quite significant compared to what they were do prior to this conversion.
So I'm gonna take this one to Gene here. Change overall sucks. I mean, it's just not something we like as people. And it may be our employees and it may be our members. So when you're doing a major conversion, you did both online and digitally, and I'm going to probably run this by all of you. How did you communicate it to your own employees so they weren't threatened by the changes you're putting in place? But even more importantly, how do you communicate it to your members who sometimes, if my app is all of a sudden green when it used to be red, I freak out because I think the whole world has changed when it really hasn't. Mm-hmm. How do you communicate to your employees what you're doing? How do you communicate to your members what you're doing from an innovation and digital transformation perspective?
You hit it right on the nail in terms of the managing expectations. So that's a huge aspect of any type of significant change. And interestingly enough, you need to communicate success as well. That's the incredibly important part, right? So in terms of digital banking, as everybody understands, right? If you convert digital banking, convert completely your experience. Like I'm a member, I used to log in here, I used to see the specific screens, all of a sudden it goes away, right? So I'm going to be upset. And message to everybody. If you convert to digital banking, everybody will be upset. Nobody's going to tell you that they thank you so much for doing this, like to me, to make change that they did not expect, right? So what needs to be done is that we manage our communications a lot. So months and months in advance, communications went out to our members. We also, I'm going to give kudos to our marketing, yet another corporation effort, right? We created a persona called Scout, and that persona is basically part of our chatbot. And that persona, marketing created a lot of videos, very cute videos where we actually explain different aspects of digital banking. And this was communicated way, way in advance to build up the anticipation. Another part of it is how do you actually communicate internally? As I said, if you get everybody on board early on, they will be on board. It's not your project, it's their project, okay? So they own it. They feel pride about it. They feel that they're not only part of it, but they're helping a lot, right? But you do need to manage success, meaning that when you convert, the only things that you're going to convert, I'm talking about digital banking, you're only going to hear bad things, okay, period, okay? Because good things, nobody's going to call you, okay? You will only hear negative feedback, because positive feedback is just no feedback. That's all it is to it, right? So you need to communicate to your internal team that this unhappiness, that's okay. I mean, that's exactly how we expect. So we were quite prepared for this. So we knew that we're going to have a lot of telephone calls. We even we hired an additional outside contact center to manage the calls, so additional influx of calls. So that's for digital banking. Now, for account opening, it's a little bit different story. Okay, for account opening, it's somewhat easier because if you introduce slick experience, and slick is a very important word here. So I hear it from a lot of members. So we did some initial testing, and that's exactly the feedback they got from Terafina onboarding was, it looks great, slick, thank you. But they see it first time. They have no recollection or no knowledge when they open an account of what happened before. They have no idea. It's a new process. Right. So from them, you actually expect a positive feedback. You may have both, right? Which is actually quite rewarding. And you will hear negative only if somebody will not be approved, obviously. They'll be complaining, no questions about it. But everybody prepared and everybody on board, it will work just fine. So that's basically the idea.
Yeah, I wanted to add, we also put together with our training department, we have an excellent training team, and we did like a post conversion training for our members. We opened it up for the entire membership to come in and see the new functions that our online banking is now does for us, right? So it was actually really great. We interacted with our members, they learned, and we also invited staff. Come in and look, see how to use it. It'll help us learn and explain what the new features are to our members.
That was really successful. That was so well done. It was so well done and so well received by the members.
Yes.
Well, we can't over communicate, but it's a thing we kind of either leave to last or we don't do. And Cindy, I was going to ask you about this, that, the operations, I'm going to call it the entire back office, has done things the same way as an organization since I was in banking, which is a long time ago. And any improvement, especially as we're moving to the digital now, it comes with a lot of challenges because you have to rethink. You're not moving from paper to PDFs. You're really completely changing the way you look at things in a digital world. You have a partnership with Terafina. Part of that partnership says they're going to bring solutions to the table, but invariably, I see all too often organizations get in the way of what your partner says they can do because operationally you say, well, we've always done it this way, or we don't want to change that. How do you encourage your team to accept what your partners will be able to bring to the table and able to do if you open up your mind and think of things differently? I mean, because it's hard, especially when you're talking about a loan adjudication officer or the person that was in charge of making sure that driver's licenses were the first part of the new account opening experience. Whatever it may be, we're all stuck in our own mindset in much the same way. I don't know how long each of you have been in total in banking, in much the same way we thought that signature cards were required when we realized all it was know your customer, and we could think of it differently. Cindy, how do you encourage as a leader your internal team to accept what your partners are bringing to the table in the way they're bringing it to the table? Because there's times when you've bought it and you didn't realize, oh, I've got to change this, and this. I wasn't ready for that. How do you encourage them to do that?
Let's look at it from this perspective. Why have you been doing it that long? Why are you doing it that way? What are we gaining out of it, right? And then actually learning how much more efficient we're going to be. And it is okay to accept it this way, right? We don't need that signature card anymore. Everything comes through DocuSign, e-sign, and it's funny you mentioned that because that did happen the very first time. What do? I didn't get a member's signature. How do I verify their signature, right? So let's look at this together. Let's learn. Let's make sure that we all understand and make sure we communicate with the entire team, not just one person out of 5, right? And also keeping them involved from the beginning. This is why we're doing it this way.
So interestingly then, Mary, when that mindset starts to become the culture as opposed to just individual cells of encouragement, how does that change the speed, but also the mindset around innovation? Because I would imagine as more and more people, there is no doubt that the three of you are running down the same path together, and it's like who can catch up to who. But when you're looking at internally, how does that empower you to do more from an innovation perspective?
I think we're really lucky in having such a great group of people that we work with that when those conversations start to take shape, like Cindy mentioned, because they do happen have happened quite often where there is this new technology, but we like what we're familiar with. And those conversations, like Cindy said, take shape from, kind of a stubborn position of, but, to, okay, I see your point. And I think the other thing that we typically do as well is we'll go back to the vendor and say, for instance, Terafina, what do you see other FIs doing? When we kind of hit that bumping heads where nobody's willing to change their position, we go to the vendor and say, what are you seeing out there? What can we do better? And what are the results of that different. So we're lucky in that most people will go, okay, I get it now.
Well, it's interesting. You just mentioned that you reference your partners. I'm sure you have other partners beyond Terafina for different solutions, be it a chatbot or anything else. The reality is that is one of the major advantages smaller organizations have who have always used partners to build their organizations. When you realize that one of the best advantages you have is that they have a lot of other partners that have fought the battles on your behalf. In other words, you're not the first one taking the slings and arrows, as you say, down the battlefield. You're the 400th or the 35th or whatever it may be. I'm sure there's sometimes you're the first. But it's like having that GPS system where if you get the red line, you go, okay, I have to make the decision. Am I going to still take that route I was going to? Am I going to take the GPS's version of it? And that interaction becomes key. And that's why our solution providers become so valuable is they bring the experiences. They can be your third party that says, okay, I'm tired of beating my head against the wall. Can you do it for me? Can you? Yeah. And it makes it so, especially when your culture is aligned. And Cindy, I think you said as part of the introduction that the organization from the top to the bottom has embraced digital transformation, innovation, change, and doing things entirely differently than what we've done them in the past. And you guys, being where you are in the San Jose area and also in Arizona, it's not like you're not surrounded by innovative companies. And as a result, consumers in your marketplace kind of expect better. And that puts, now the good news is your employees are also the same kind of consumers. They've changed to streaming services. They understand the difference between cable and streaming. They're doing all these things. Gene, when you look at the overall digital transformation, moving to digital, what do you see as the biggest change in your organization from the perspective of digital engagement, and what do you see in the near future really changing the way you do your business?
Okay, so I'm going to probably repeating like millions of people that saying the same thing, right? Obviously, everything that has to do with AI, right? But it's becoming a cliche really quickly, right? That's what I'm afraid. I don't want to repeat the same thing. So I'm going to mention generative AI for sure, right? It's true. But, okay, what everybody needs to understand is that, and this is where my technical hat basically I bring on, right? There's certain things that can do, certain things that cannot, okay? And if you have certain expectations for technology, it will work. And specifically for generative AI, what really does work, what people do not realize, if it's a focused, specifically built experience that's solve one thing, that works really well. Okay, so something that we see from generative AI, something like OpenAI, or from Gemini from Google, or from Lambda, we were looking at Facebook, everything like that. You can't quite repeat it, okay? Because they spent enormous amount of money on this, on so-called generative intelligence. It's not generative intelligence, not even close, but still, they can answer many questions. So if you narrow your focus for a specific thing, right, you can build a tool that's incredibly helpful for your people. There's a way to do it, okay? So that's probably going to be biggest change. But I'm not saying anything new here, but the only thing I'm saying is that you need to realize what this change brings, number one. Number two is that nobody's going to lose their jobs. That's not going to happen, okay? And we're going to evolve, as we always evolve with any technology, right? So look at our unemployment rates. Like, what are we, everybody on the streets? Like, how many years we've been talking about automation, right? And it's like, still, like, it's true. I mean, certain manufacturing is automating a lot, but so what? There's other jobs. So that's going to change a lot, which brings me to another point. What we're seeing a lot is that we're building help for the customer, right? So something that we have built in right now, we have another partner of ours that does the traditional chatbot, actually, and we are thinking to do something with generative AI as well. So we have that. But what we're thinking is that certain guidance to members, for example, for account opening, I think that's something that's on really, really on our mind. So how can we help customers to feel that they get lost and be above and beyond what was done before? Because a lot of people have heartburn from existing chatbots. That technology was rudimentary. Let's put it this way: it's cute, nice, but it's not always helpful, right? So, but new evolution is coming, and I think that will bring the big change.
So, Gene, I'm going to stick with you here, and I'm going to go to the other two people as well, because I'm not lucky enough on a lot of my podcasts to have somebody from the digital side, somebody from the operations and risk side, and somebody from the innovation side. So I'm going to ask each of you, because I know the answer will be somewhat different. Gene, from your perspective, as much as we'd like to think that everything always goes smoothly, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
What is the biggest challenge you face on a day in, day out basis that makes your job just a little bit tougher because of just human stuff or whatever?
Okay, well, it's definitely unknown, right? I would say the most significant, and it's not a challenge, okay? It's not a challenge, it's something that you can overcome, right? So, as I mentioned before, credit unions are spread thin. They always they don't have a lot of fat. They cannot fire tons of people and just feel nothing, right? So, if tomorrow, big company, I'm not going to name any names, fire everybody, 10% of the whole company, nobody's going to notice, okay? And company will not notice at all, okay? We have these examples. In credit union business, it's not like that, okay? We're incredibly thin, okay? But it also makes us fast, more nimble than banks by far, no comparison. We can adopt new technologies. There's certain things that we see and know from behind. I know that for sure. Okay, I know stuff about the industry basically that we can achieve that banks cannot, not even close, because they have interesting issues with the huge, ginormous sizes of data sets that they need to deal with. That also cost a lot of money and takes time. But coming all back to my comment is that we are spread thin, which means that all of us kind of need to work together, okay, and be in a lockstep. So that's incredibly important, right? You always put your ear to the ground and see what's going on, who's getting some sort of either it's a negativity or there's some sort of information that you didn't know about. You need to be always in lockstep with each other, all the departments. So we kind of big on communication internally. Mm-hmm. So we have tons of meetings, for example, our department, our small department. We have regular meetings with our departments, some of them every week, some of them, with Cindy, we meet all the time, right? And every day. Every day, yes, because there's something going on always, right? So you need to be on top of things, right? And faster you address it, the better. Yeah. So it's not quite a challenge. I would say it's a modus operandi. That does make sense. So it's not it's a way of life. That's all it is. It's real. Yeah.
Oh no, it's real. I mean, it's not a roadblock. It's a hurdle. So it's Cindy. What do you see as the biggest challenge, Cindy?
I think it kind of adds on to what June was saying, right? Is maintaining up to date on constant regulatory changes or upticks in fraudulent trends, right? Right when you think you got those gaps closed, something else happens, right? And so it could be a little bit challenging because now you got to brainstorm, figure out, all right, we need to take action here. We need to, who do you need to contact? Let's get everybody together. Let's work on this. So I think it's just constantly keeping up to date with those types of changes.
Mary, how about you?
Mine's kind of a fun challenge to have. And, there's so much new technology out there, right? There's just so much going on. And it's predict and prioritize, right? Predict what would be best and then prioritize based on everything that's out there versus the needs. So it's a fun challenge.
Mary, that is a great comment because the prioritization, we sometimes, and I'm going to refer to Gene's comment too, we think sometimes that we talk about Gen AI. The reality is that is probably further down your sight line than is in Gene, because you're saying, I got to prioritize and I got some basics I got to get right. And Cindy thinks she's got everything settled until she gets to work that day and finds out that there's been another, thing that's gone after the system. And you go, okay, we avoided that one, but oh my gosh, these guys are all out here beating us up on an ongoing basis from a risk and fraud perspective. So, Mary, when you're talking about priorities, we sometimes get ahead of ourselves as financial institutions, and as a result, we get nowhere. We talk about sometimes when you don't prioritize, you end up standing in place, being overwhelmed by what can happen. I'm going to go back to, because I wasn't going to let you off the hook on that. What do you have on your to-do list? Because you didn't answer that question. So from that prioritization perspective, what are some of your priorities for the rest of this year that you say, maybe they're big dreams, maybe they're just little things that just keep on gnawing at you? What is the priority at Meriwest right now?
To Gene's point, generative AI and how we leverage that actually is a big deal. Because it works on both sides, right? The member has a better experience because we're communicating with them in a method that is most convenient and most comfortable for them. So in that aspect, generative AI is a really good tool. Yeah. On the back end side of that, using generative AI to help our staff be more efficient to get answers to their questions in a quick and efficient way when they have a member sitting in front of them. Yeah. That's big on our list of priorities.
Boy, that's a good one, because we tend to take channels as individual channels. So we take the chatbot here, we take the direct customer interaction at the branch here, we take the customer care area here, and one of the biggest challenges financial institutions have now, in fact, every organization has, is how do I make these so that they're seamless between each other? Because they don't innovate at the same speed, and yet I don't want to have a member get a different answer or different level of understanding of my problem if they go to a different channel. So, Gene, from that perspective, and from the whole idea of digital transformation,
okay,
how do you pick your partners to work with? Because
that's a good one.
Because that is one of these things that is not the same for every organization, but when you're trying to figure out who do I partner with to move me forward, what do you look at?
Okay,
Gene?
so there's a couple of things, right? So, and you're making a very good point, actually. So one thing is that definitely everybody concentrate. Let's look at features, what they can do, right? But the problem is that if you look at it in a silo, it may not work well. So there are better companies that do better things by themselves. It's great, right? But how do you glue all of it together so it works seamlessly? That's probably the most significant part. So very often when we're selecting, for example, our chatbot provider, right? And I'm going to call it chatbot, that's just easier. It's a conversational intelligence. Sometimes they get offended by the name chatbot. We talk to...
Yes, they do.
They do.
I know that.
It is conversation.
Yes.
By far more.
We're more than a chat
It's
bot.
more than
Yes,
a chat
exactly.
bot, by far, right? So there's enormous number of features that we look at, right? So we talked probably to 7 companies at least, minimum, okay? And it took us probably several years to make a choice until we realized that by itself will not work well, okay? It needs to work together. So the fact that it does this thing, this beautiful thing, works great by itself, doesn't do a thing, okay? So how do we choose? We choose providers in a consortium. It needs to be collective working effort, okay? So the first most thing what we do is how do we glue it together? And then we'll go from it, okay? So, and if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit, even though it's like the best provider in the world in terms.
So really what you're saying is you got to play well with others. You got to be able to work with the other partners. And you know what? That's interesting because I remember, and I brought this up in another podcast that I believe it was 2019, maybe at the Financial Brand Forum, we saw as many providers talking to each other as they were talking to clients. And I started seeing this whole dynamic where organizations figured out, you know what, I can't view everybody as a competitor. I've got to view them as everybody's got their sweet spot, and I've got to work with everybody. Number one, they all realized if they didn't get along with the core systems, it was going to be a blow up right from the beginning because, even though the core system will say, well, we can do that for you, we can do that for you, the reality is they don't do it in many times as well. You still need your core provider, but you also need to find partners that can work with them. And as you said, I need to make sure my new account opening partner, works with my chatbot partner, works with my
online banking or anything like
my
that.
whatever else, my
Online
fraud
banking.
and risk. Yes, online banking part. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a very key element. And at the end of the day, cities can be sitting there with an overarching view going, you know what? I don't think they're as secure as I need them. And because at the end of the day, her job is and her team's job is going to be on the line if the organization that you're partnering with doesn't make you feel comfortable. And I use the football analogy and go, it used to be that we could run down the field with our partners and make sure they are doing what we wanted to the way we want them to do it. We got to let go now because we can't move fast enough if we hold their hands. Yeah. But the reality is that means, as you said, Gene, they got to work really well with each other. So, Cindy, from your perspective then, as you look at what you look at for a partner, I'm sure because you wear a couple different hats. So sometimes
it's more
you're
than
fighting.
a couple, Jim.
Yeah, but sometimes you're fighting against yourself. You're in these meetings going, wait, that's my person, and they're at each other's necks. This is not good. But what do you look at for a partner?
We want to make sure to support what Gene said. How they glue together. Do they work well? How is it going to affect these processes? And I think overall member experience, right? We have an intensive vendor management review as well. So that's a key part of any vendor that we onboard. But in terms of the experience, it's finding that balance between the risk and the experience. And on the user side, I'm not a fan of let's bring on this vendor because that vendor can't support this function. So we stay away from things like that.
So I'm not sure who's the closest to answer this question. I'm going to depend on you guys, but I've heard from Terafina that you've just recently implemented direct deposit switch and financial needs analysis for your members. Couple things. Number one, how does it positively impact your members, and why did you take on these features? In the prioritization of everything, why did these rise to the top?
This is something I would like to answer. So this is something we plan to do. Okay, it's not something we've done yet. Okay. So that's what we're planning to do. So those features. So what happens is that during account opening, you kind of have already a captive audience, right? So member already submitted all the information. So we submitted the most important know your customer, like PIIs. So at this point, switching direct deposit and deepening the relationship with a member is the best time to do it. So that's why we're looking at it, that we know from profitability perspective, from relationship perspective, those that have direct deposit means that this particular member has you as your primary financial institution. And that's the goal. So at the end of the day, we all hoping that members are going to choose us as their primary financial institution. So it kind of makes sense, like as a final step in the process, that, okay, we already approved, you open the account, and it's like really easy peasy to let's switch you over, okay? And offer you possibly some sort of incentives. I think that's important. So what we're looking at is, and that's not implemented yet, this is something we're looking at this. So two things is, first of all, bundling. We're looking at definitely put together bundles of products. So if you apply, and you get a couple of products plus you get direct deposit, you're going to get a spiff. And second is that direct deposit switching. It was high on our radar, like for many years. Problem was that what we find out that switching in online is actually quite challenging. So remember, it's challenging, meaning that the whole process is not necessarily smooth. So much that traction for direct deposit switching online is very low. So what companies prefer, they try to do both, and they realize the only branch one that works because person is in front of you, right? And it changes rapidly with the latest technology, and Terafina does have the integration with some partners that's capable of doing it online quite nicely. And that's number one. And something that we kind of worry less about Terafina about is that their philosophy is open API. So they pretty much integrate with anybody, period. Okay. So if somebody allows them to connect, they'll connect, period. Okay. we did a lot of firsts with Terafina as well. So we were like certain technology we adopted as a first provider, and we were completely confident it's going to happen. Okay, so that doesn't bother us. So if we're going to bring some other provider that does incredibly good stuff, and Terafina usually says, "Fine, yes, it will cost you time and money, definitely, but we do it." So no problem. But I know they're going to make it happen because they've done it before. So that's all it is, right?
You know what? It's very interesting. Your organization is obviously very focused on continuous improvement, making sure everybody's on the same page, finding the right partners to get things done, and you're far from standing still. It's fun because when having three people on a podcast is challenging at best in my mind, because especially when it's audio. So I apologize for anybody who didn't know the difference between Cindy and Mary, but I think you got an idea based on their answers and also what they talked about. But what was interesting is these are three people that are pulling in the same direction with the same mission, and obviously whatever level's above them is doing the same thing because, and oh, by the way, every level below them are pulling the same direction. This makes the whole process of communication, digital transformation, and innovation a lot easier. Secondly, it is very clear from this conversation that this organization believes in partners and will put a lot of faith in partners, but no one's going to have any easy path in getting into the organization if they don't meet the criteria of, you know what, would I put my life on the line for them? Because in a financial institution, you kind of are. So with everything you've done and truly being an organization that I'm very excited about having on the podcast today, because there's a lot of great organizations out there I haven't met yet, and I'm really honored to be part of this podcast because you've opened my eyes to the importance of communication, the importance of leadership, the importance of continually looking for the next way to make members' experiences better. So, Mary, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to go around the horn as if you're on the video feed. What recommendation would you give other organizations that are stuck on stop or neutral?
In regard to growth or in regard to looking for a partner?
Transformation, just overall transformation, and on becoming more, because what you're doing, you're not only becoming more future ready, you're becoming more resilient as an organization. You're extending the life of the organization because you're on the front end of this whole digital maturities curve. So what is the one thing you recommend to an institution as they embark upon fast innovation at speed and scale, and just an overall digital transformation process?
I think there's a couple of things. So one is listening to your community, right? We get a lot of feedback, and even when it's negative feedback, it's sometimes the most worthwhile feedback, right? So I think listening to your community, don't guess at what people need, listen to what they need. And also look at what your competitors are doing, and then weigh that against the technology that's available to, serve as that conduit or that solution. And then also choose the partner, in kind of following up to what everyone else was saying, that is an extension of your own team, that you feel through the course of the conversations and the vetting that this is a team that you feel is going to closely walk with you in your team. And we've been very fortunate with Terafina and some of the others that we absolutely have that kind of relationship where we don't feel separation in us and them. It is us, period.
Well, it's interesting because I'll just input my insight just from what I've seen so far. You set the bar pretty high, but you probably also pull along some of your partners because you're at the front edge of what they're doing in medication. You already mentioned it in a case, Gene mentioned it, but it's interesting because you bring value to your partners at the same time they're bringing value to you. Gene, from your perspective, what recommendation would you have?
So I'm going to echo of get everybody on the same page, like for sure. That's an incredibly important part. So that's number one. Number two is that I know it's kind of obvious, but it's not necessarily taken to heart. IT is your friend, okay? by far. So you cannot do it alone, for sure. Okay, so buy-in from IT and everybody pulling in the same direction is incredibly important. So because if you think that you can do it yourself, think again. It's not going to happen. And if you think that IT is not involved and it's going to do it, vendor is going to do it by themselves, think again. That's not going to happen. It's like no questions about it. So if you do it in lockstep and do it this transformation together, then it will work quite nicely, for sure. So that's my message to everybody.
Okay. So Cindy, what recommendation would you give financial institutions today based on what you've learned over the years here?
Well, Jim, I think I echo what Mary and Jean were saying, and I think listening to the community and listening to your employees, I think that employees have a lot to say. They see a lot, they do a lot. Is there better ways of doing things? Evaluate your processes. Determine, are we as efficient as we can be? Are we doing the right thing? Don't let your systems become stale. Just because a process has worked for the last 10 years doesn't mean it's the right thing to continue doing.
The three of you, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show today. You've brought insight to me. You inspired me we're recording this on a Friday, and it's always good to get that pump up at the end of a week. And I just, I'll look forward to meeting with you again, because obviously you're doing some things that many organizations only dream of. Your digital maturity is high up on the scale compared to others, and you're having fun. And I at the end of the day, I have to tell you, it is so clear that you guys are just a jolly group. It's as if nothing is going to get in the way, and that says a lot, because at the end of the day, you're going to be able to make change happen if it's fun.
Yes.
So I really appreciate that. I appreciate you all being on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was really well done.
Thanks for listening to Banking Transformed, the top podcast in retail banking and the winner of 3 international awards for podcast excellence. If you enjoy what we're doing, please take some time to show some love in the form of a review. Finally, be sure to catch my recent articles on the financial brand and check out the research we're doing for the Digital Banking Report. This has been a production of Evergreen Podcast. A special thank you to our senior producer, Leah Hassage, audio engineer, Chris Fafalius, and video producer, Will Pritz. If you've not already done so, remember to subscribe to Banking Transformed on both your favorite podcast app and on YouTube for more thought-provoking discussions on the intersection of finance, technology, and leadership.